You sit at your desk, highlighter in hand, copying notes line by line. You watch video lectures, nodding along. It feels productive. Your page fills with color. Your mind feels busy. But here's the ugly truth. Most of what you call study is intellectual cosplay. You're dressing up as a learner, not becoming one. Picture a hamster on a wheel, spinning furiously, going nowhere. That's you, highlighting textbooks, rewriting slides, rewatching lessons. The motion fools your brain into thinking you're moving forward. But the scenery, your understanding, never changes. This habit is everywhere. Schools teach it, study influencers praise it, apps gamify it. But deep inside, you know something's wrong. You finish a chapter, close your notebook, and your mind is empty. Ask yourself, could you explain what you read in your own words to a 5-year-old? Or do you just recognize the terms, mistaking familiarity for mastery? Here's the myth. The more you repeat, the more you'll remember. The more you decorate your notes, the smarter you'll get. But science and Feynman say otherwise. Passive review creates the illusion of learning, not the reality. You're confusing exposure with understanding. And this is why, when the test comes, your mind blanks. Because you never built the mental machinery to recall and use the ideas. Let's get brutally honest. Rewriting and highlighting are rituals of comfort. They keep anxiety at bay. But comfort is not learning. Friction is. Real understanding burns. It's uncomfortable. It's the moment you realize you don't know. Most people run from that feeling. You, if you're honest, probably avoid it too. But that's the door you need to walk through. Think about it. If learning was just about repetition, parrots would be Nobel laureates. But they're not. Because repeating words isn't the same as grasping ideas. Your brain is not a tape recorder. It's a pattern detector. It needs to wrestle with concepts, not just replay them. Here's the first mind shift. If you want to build knowledge that lasts, you must break the habit of passive imitation. Stop playing school. Start thinking like a scientist, curious, ruthless, unafraid to confront ignorance. The pain of not knowing is the birthplace of true understanding. That discomfort you feel? That's your brain stretching, forging new connections. It's the only way to grow. But here's the error everyone makes. You confuse the ease of recognition with the power of recall. You see a highlighted sentence and think, I know this. But can you reconstruct the idea from scratch, without the book? Can you teach it, build on it, question it? If not, you're still on the hamster wheel. So, if you want to join the minority who studies to understand, not just to pass, subscribe. The rest of this video is not for the comfortable. It's for those ready to get off the wheel and actually move somewhere new. Richard Feynman looked at the world like a physicist stares at a blackboard covered in equations, not as a puzzle to memorize, but as a system to break apart and reconstruct from scratch. He didn't care for status, grades, or looking smart. He cared about the engine under the hood, understanding. Here's the scene. Feynman, young and ambitious, sits in the Princeton Library. He's surrounded by students highlighting textbooks like they're painting fences, line after line, color after color. They look busy, but Feynman? He's frowning at a single page, muttering to himself, erasing, scribbling diagrams. He's not copying the answer, he's wrestling with the problem until it screams out the logic, not just the label. He once described this difference. You can know the name of a bird in all the languages of the world, but when you're finished, you'll know absolutely nothing whatever about the bird. So let's look at the bird and see what it's doing. That's what counts. Imagine your brain is a muscle. Most people sit on the exercise bike, turning the pedals in the air. No resistance, no sweat, no growth. That's passive study. Feynman, on the other hand, bolts the bike to the ground, cranks up the resistance, and feels the burn. He leaves the gym stronger. The others leave tired, but unchanged. This is the Feynman lens. Real learning is about building models from zero, not decorating your mind with trivia. It's uncomfortable, it's inconvenient, but it's the only way to build mental muscles that actually work in the real world. Here's the error everyone makes: confusing activity with progress. You can fill notebooks and still leave your mind empty. Feynman saw through that. He asked, "What do I really understand? Can I explain it in plain words? Can I rebuild it from the ground up?" If not, he knew it was fake. He refused to fool himself because, as he famously said, you are the easiest person to fool. But let's go deeper. Feynman's approach wasn't just a quirky habit. It was a philosophy of intellectual survival. He grew up in a home where his father, Melville, would walk with him through the woods and ask, "Why does this wheel spin?" Not, "What is it called?" but, "What makes it move?" The habit stuck. Feynman learned to distrust the comfort of names and crave the discomfort of causes. He carried this into his career. At Los Alamos, surrounded by Nobel-level minds, he was the one who asked the embarrassing questions, the ones everyone else was too proud to admit they didn't understand. He'd say, "Suppose we start from scratch. What do we actually know? What are we just assuming?" He didn't care if it made him look ignorant. He cared about not being ignorant. Picture this: a room full of experts nodding along, and Feynman interrupts. "Wait, but why does that formula work?" The room goes silent. Most people fear that silence. Feynman thrived in it. He knew that the silence after a real question is where understanding is born. That's the Feynman lens. Don't decorate your ignorance, dismantle it. Here's the mistake that traps almost everyone: thinking that looking busy is the same as being smart. It's not. It's theater. Feynman's method is demolition before construction. Tear down the wall of jargon, then build a new structure with bricks you actually understand. He called this the pleasure of finding things out. It's not just about knowledge. It's about the thrill of discovery, the satisfaction of making the universe make sense in your own head. That's what you're after. Not applause, not grades, not the illusion of mastery, the real thing. So next time you catch yourself highlighting, copying, or nodding along, ask, "Am I really understanding or just rehearsing the script?" Feynman would say, "Throw away the script. Build your own play, line by line, from first principles." That's the only way to learn anything worth knowing. Here's the neurological trap. Your brain is designed to conserve energy. When you passively highlight, copy, or transcribe, it switches to autopilot. You feel busy, but nothing is being built, just surface echoes. It's like standing in front of a mirror, practicing a speech by mouthing the words, but never daring to speak them aloud in a real conversation. There's no friction, no feedback, no growth. Imagine trying to learn to ride a bike by watching videos and tracing the outline of a bicycle on paper. Would you expect your balance to improve? Of course not. Yet that's what most study habits are: tracing, not riding. You're rehearsing the motions, but never engaging the muscles that matter. The brain, like a muscle, only grows when it's forced to adapt to real resistance. Neuroscience calls this the illusion of competence. Your hippocampus, responsible for encoding memories, barely lights up when you copy or passively review. But when you struggle, make mistakes, and reconstruct ideas from scratch, your brain forges real connections. The easy path tricks you. You get the dopamine rush of completion, not comprehension. It's a sugar high, quick, addictive, and gone when you need it most. This is why you can reread notes, underline textbooks, and feel like you know it, until a question surprises you and everything blanks. The script was never yours. It was borrowed, and you never rehearsed improvising. When the test comes or real life asks for an answer, you're left with empty hands. Feynman saw through this. He understood that knowledge isn't transferred like a file. It's built, neuron by neuron, through friction and error. That's why he refused rote memorization. He wanted to feel the resistance, the effort of making sense from scratch. He'd take apart a concept, break it into pieces, and force himself to explain it in plain language. If he couldn't, he knew he didn't understand. No shortcuts, no pretending. Here's the error everyone makes: thinking that repetition leads to understanding. Repetition without reconstruction is just noise. Like rewinding the same piano key, it doesn't make you a pianist. Only when you try to play the melody yourself, hands trembling, do you begin to learn. The act of struggling, failing, and rebuilding is what wires the brain for mastery. You want to learn faster? Stop trying to feel comfortable. Your brain grows from discomfort. Real learning is metabolic work. It hurts, it's slow, it's frustrating. That's the point. Feynman called this the pleasure of finding things out, not the pleasure of highlighting them. The pleasure is in the chase, not the capture. It's in the moment you realize you don't know and decide to wrestle with the unknown until it yields. If your mind isn't sweating, you're not learning. You're just watching others ride the bike. It's time to get on. The next time you feel the urge to reach for the highlighter or copy someone else's notes, pause. Ask yourself, am I building or just tracing? Am I writing or just watching? But here's the next pitfall. Even when you know this, your mind will resist change. Comfort is seductive. Your ego hates being exposed as a beginner. Let's dissect why. Your brain was not built for modern study habits. It was built for survival. Passive study, highlighting, copying, watching, feels safe because it triggers the illusion of progress. It's like walking on a treadmill with a VR headset. Your legs move, the scenery changes, but you're going nowhere. This is not your fault. It's your biology at work. Here's the core. Dopamine rewards the familiar. Each time you highlight a sentence or copy a diagram, your brain gets a small hit. Good job, you did something. But this is a neurochemical trick. You haven't created any new pathways. You haven't forced your neurons to rearrange. You haven't made the connections that matter. Think of it like stacking blocks without any glue. The tower looks impressive, but the first gust of wind, it collapses. That gust is your exam, or the moment someone asks you to explain. Passive habits stack blocks. Real learning fuses them. Feynman saw this in the lecture halls of Princeton and Caltech. Students would nod along, underline, and feel smart. But ask them to explain, and they'd fall silent. They hadn't built the scaffolding. Their knowledge was a house of cards. Feynman called this cargo cult learning, imitating the rituals of study but missing the substance. Why does the traditional method fail neurologically? Because recall, not recognition, is the engine of memory. Watching and copying are acts of recognition. They're easy. But recall, forcing yourself to retrieve, reconstruct, and explain, feels hard. Your brain avoids it. It's metabolic cost. But this is the very friction that forges memory. Let's go deeper. When you simply reread or highlight, you're activating the same neural circuits over and over. No new connections, no adaptation. Your brain is efficient. It doesn't waste energy on what it already knows. But when you struggle to recall, when you try to explain a concept in your own words, you force your brain to build new synapses. This is neuroplasticity in action. The discomfort you feel is the signal that real change is happening. Here's the error everyone makes, mistaking comfort for competence. You feel productive because you're busy, but your neural circuits are idle. The path of least resistance leads nowhere. The brain craves efficiency, but learning is inherently inefficient. It's supposed to be. That's why most people plateau. They stop at the point where things feel easy. Feynman's genius wasn't raw intelligence, it was his willingness to wrestle with confusion. He invited the discomfort. He knew that confusion is not a sign of failure, but a signal that you're on the edge of understanding. He would say, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. That's not just a slogan, it's a neurological truth. So the next time your hand reaches for the highlighter, pause. Ask, am I building or just stacking blocks? That moment of honesty is the start of real learning. The friction you feel is not an obstacle, it's the forge. If you want to build a mind that can withstand the storms of complexity, you have to let go of the comfort of passivity. You have to choose the hard path. That's where the transformation happens. Now, let's rip the comfort bandage off. Here's the blueprint. You don't learn by absorbing, but by reconstructing. Picture this. You're standing in front of a blank whiteboard. No notes, no textbook. Could you, right now, explain the core concept you just studied to a 10-year-old? If not, you haven't learned. That's the Feynman gauntlet. No hiding, no decoration. First step, pick the idea you're supposed to be learning. Close the book. Start writing, drawing, or speaking out loud as if you're teaching it to someone with zero background. Stumble, get stuck, that's gold. Every hesitation is a missing brick in your understanding. Now identify the gaps. Where the logic crumbles, where you can't explain why something works, mark it. Go back to the source only to patch that specific hole. Then repeat. Explain it again, cleaner, simpler. The goal is ruthless clarity, not surface polish. Imagine you're building a bridge from one cliff to another. Copying someone else's blueprint gives you a picture, not a bridge. Only struggling with the materials, testing, failing, correcting, builds the real span. Here's the kicker. This method feels slow. You'll cover less ground at first, but every step is yours. You own the terrain. No cramming, no fragile memory, just deep, flexible understanding. Feynman himself used this process relentlessly, scribbling equations, sketching diagrams, talking aloud until the fog cleared. Don't chase speed, chase solidity. Knowledge isn't a race, it's construction. Every time you force yourself to explain, you're mixing the cement. When you can teach a concept simply, without notes or prompts, that's when you know you've built something real. But here's the error everyone makes. They confuse recognition with recall. Seeing a familiar formula or highlighted sentence feels like knowledge, but it's a mirage. The real test is recall. Can you summon the idea from scratch with no cues? Feynman called this the difference between knowing the name of something and knowing the thing itself. So, how do you put this into practice? After each study session, close your materials. On a blank sheet, reconstruct the argument, the process, the mechanism. Don't just repeat definitions, connect the dots. Why does step A lead to step B? What would happen if you changed a variable? Challenge yourself to create analogies or metaphors that make sense to you. If you can't, that's a signal. You need to dig deeper. Next, teach it. Find a friend, a sibling, or just an imaginary audience. Speak the idea out loud. The act of verbalizing forces your brain to organize the chaos. You'll trip over gaps you didn't know existed. That's not failure, that's the map to mastery. Finally, iterate. Each round of explanation should get simpler, clearer, more precise. Strip away jargon. If you rely on fancy words, you're probably hiding ignorance. Feynman was ruthless with himself here. He refused to move on until he could explain quantum electrodynamics in plain language. If he got stuck, he'd go back, break the idea down further, and start again. This is not glamorous, it's not fast, but it's the only way to build knowledge that lasts. The friction you feel is the brain's signal that you're forging new connections. Embrace it. The world is full of people who can recite, but few who can reconstruct. If you want to be in the minority who truly understand, this is your path. So next time you finish a chapter, don't reach for the highlighter, reach for the blank page. Build the bridge yourself. That's how you turn information into understanding and understanding into power. But here's the catch. Most people sabotage this process before it even begins. Not because you're lazy, but because your brain is an expert at self-deception. When you pick up the blank page, something uncomfortable happens. Suddenly, the illusion of mastery cracks. You realize you can't explain what you just read. It stings. That sting is your ego, an ancient defense mechanism trying to protect you from the pain of ignorance. Imagine building a model airplane. With the instructions beside you, every step feels safe. But try assembling it from memory, and immediately you see the gaps in your knowledge. That discomfort, that's where real learning starts. Yet, most people turn away at the first sign of friction. They run back to the notes, the videos, the comfort of someone else's explanations. Why? Because it feels productive. Because it's easy to mistake familiarity for understanding. Feynman called this the pleasure of knowing the name of something. You trick yourself into believing that recognition equals comprehension. But knowing the label isn't the same as knowing how the engine works. The mind wants shortcuts. It hates the vulnerability of not knowing. So it invents excuses. I'll understand later. I just need to review more. This method is too slow. But here's the error everyone makes. Avoiding mental friction to protect your self-image guarantees shallow learning. If you never test your own understanding, you never see its weaknesses. You build a beautiful facade, shiny but hollow. Let's be brutally honest. Your brain is wired to avoid pain, including the pain of confronting your own ignorance. This isn't just psychological. Neurologically, your brain rewards you with dopamine for activities that feel good, like rereading, highlighting, or watching another video. These are low-effort, high-reward behaviors. But the real work, the kind that rewires your neurons for deep understanding, requires struggle. It's in the act of wrestling with a concept, failing to explain it, and then trying again, that your brain actually grows. This is called desirable difficulty. Think of it like weightlifting. If you only ever lift what's comfortable, your muscles never grow. The discomfort is the signal that adaptation is happening. Intellectual growth is no different. The blank page is your mental gym. Each failed attempt to explain is a repetition. Each gap you expose is a muscle you can strengthen. But here's another trap: perfectionism. Many people refuse to try explaining until they feel they know enough. This is just fear in disguise. Feynman himself would start explaining concepts to others before he felt ready. He used the act of explanation as a tool to discover what he didn't know. He wasn't afraid to look foolish. He knew that exposing ignorance was the fastest route to understanding. So, what stops you? Ego, the fear of looking stupid, even to yourself. The comfort of passive review, the illusion of progress. These are the hidden obstacles. They're not obvious, but they're powerful. They keep you circling the runway, never taking off. To break this cycle, you must accept the discomfort. Embrace the blank page as a diagnostic tool. Let the gaps reveal themselves. Don't rush to cover them up. If you can't explain it simply, you haven't understood it. That's not failure. That's the first honest step to real mastery. Feynman didn't just tolerate this discomfort, he sought it out. He knew that every exposed gap was a doorway to deeper understanding. The question is, will you? Here's the twist you probably never saw coming. This habit of honest confrontation isn't just about learning physics or passing a test. It's the operating system for every deep skill you will ever require. Picture a sculptor, chisel in hand, staring at a block of marble. If they only trace lines on the surface, the statue never emerges, just markings, no substance. The friction of cutting, the resistance, is where the art forms. Your brain is that marble. Passive review, copying, highlighting, that's tracing. Understanding is chiseling. And this principle explodes far beyond study sessions. Want to solve real problems at work, build a company, master a craft? The same law applies. Friction is the birthplace of insight. Feynman knew this. That's why, when faced with a mystery, he'd strip away jargon and buzzwords, forcing himself to rebuild from scratch. He didn't care about looking clever. He cared about being clear, first to himself, then to others. Here's the error that traps almost everyone: thinking that comfort means competence. In reality, comfort is often the alarm bell of stagnation. The discomfort you feel when you can't explain something isn't a verdict on your intelligence. It's the raw material for growth. When you stop running from that friction, when you choose to wrestle with it, your mind starts rewiring itself. New connections form, weak links strengthen. The learning becomes yours, not just borrowed from a textbook. Let's stretch this analogy further. Imagine you're learning to play the piano. If you only play the pieces you already know, your fingers never stumble, but your skill plateaus. The moment you tackle a new, difficult piece, fumbling, making mistakes, repeating the same bar until your hands ache, that's when your brain is forced to adapt. Neuroplasticity kicks in. The discomfort is the signal that you're pushing the boundaries of your current ability. The same is true for writing, coding, public speaking, even relationships. Growth is always disguised as resistance. But here's where most people bail out. At the first sign of struggle, they retreat to what's familiar. They reread notes instead of testing recall. They watch another tutorial instead of building something themselves. They rehearse answers in their head instead of saying them out loud. This avoidance feels productive, but it's just intellectual busywork. It's the illusion of progress, not the reality. Feynman called this self-deception the most dangerous trap in science and in life. He said, "The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool." When you avoid friction, you're not just missing out on deeper understanding, you're actively reinforcing your own blind spots. You're building a fortress of false confidence, brick by brick. So next time you feel that resistance, the itch to check the answer key, the urge to glance at your notes, pause, recognize it. That is the moment that separates surface learners from masters, the sculptor from the tracer. Feynman called this the pleasure of finding things out because the struggle is where understanding is born. Don't just endure the friction, seek it, because every domain that matters will demand it from you. And the world rewards those who dare to chisel deeper. This is the universal law. The discomfort of honest learning is not a bug, but the very feature that makes real growth possible. It's the only way to transform knowledge from something you rent into something you own. And once you see this, you can't unsee it. Every challenge, every moment of confusion becomes an invitation, not to retreat, but to engage, to chisel, not trace, to build, not borrow. Now, picture your mind as a workshop. Most people spend their lives just rearranging tools on the table, labeling, organizing, polishing, never daring to actually build anything. You, after today, become the builder. Every act of breaking down a concept, every time you force yourself to explain an idea from scratch, you hammer a new beam in place. The structure grows sturdy. This is not just about exams or grades or fleeting applause. It's about how you approach reality itself. When you stop copying and start constructing, you stop outsourcing your thinking. You become the architect, not the tenant of your understanding. Here's the epiphany. The world is full of noise, summaries, shortcuts, second-hand explanations. But the mind that truly learns is rare because it chooses friction over comfort. You'll see it everywhere now. In someone parroting jargon at a meeting, in a student reciting without grasping, in yourself whenever you sense the urge to hide behind notes instead of wrestling with the idea. So here's your new model. Don't just study, interrogate. Don't just memorize, reconstruct. Don't just follow, invent. Each topic, each problem is a block of raw marble. You can either dust it off and admire it, or you can carve your own statue. The second path is harder, but it's the only one that leaves you with something real in your hands. Feynman never accepted borrowed knowledge. He would ask, can you explain it to a child? Can you make it simple without losing the essence? If not, you don't own the idea, you're just renting it. This is the difference between knowing the name of something and knowing the thing itself. Most people stop at the label. You now will dig for the mechanism. Let's be honest, this is not the easy road. There will be moments when you feel lost, when the answer doesn't come, when you're tempted to peek at the solution or parrot the summary. That's the precise moment growth happens. The discomfort is the signal. The confusion is the invitation. Every time you resist the urge to copy and instead reconstruct, you are rewiring your brain for real understanding. You're building neural pathways that last. You're not just passing a test, you're changing the way you think. This is the mind shift. Learning is not a performance, it's a transformation. The world rewards those who can truly think, not just those who can repeat. In science, in business, in life, the ones who rise are the ones who build from first principles. They don't just accept the map, they redraw it. They don't just walk the path, they pave new ones. So, as you leave this video, take this with you. Every subject is a landscape. You can either be a tourist, snapping pictures and moving on, or you can be an explorer, mapping the terrain, getting your hands dirty, discovering what no one else sees. The explorer's journey is longer, but the discoveries are yours forever. If this video turned a gear in your mind, imagine what happens when the whole engine fires up. Inscribe yourself in the minority who choose to understand, not just perform. Subscribe for the next mind shift. Let's keep building.